So how the book was written, the last, again, it had been rolling around in my mind as any curator would look at collections and think about them. But then the pandemic hit, and luckily the dean of the libraries and the chancellor knew I was busy with this exhibition, and so I was able to come back before the university was open, and indeed anyone was in the library except the security staff. And so the guards kept me company while I worked through the books that I had already written out a few weeks earlier in an outline. And so this was sort of my dance. It was a great privilege. I had a letter of transit to kind of to go across the campus in case someone would ask me, but I don't know, everyone knew that I tended to work anyway. And so they could, so luckily I was able to be here and commune with these wonderful pieces. Actually, this one aisle, you're looking at Ethan Allen Hitchcock's Alchemy collection. Next to that is John Mason Peck's Frontier Circuit Rider collection. And towards the back is the First Library of St. Louis, the St. Louis Lyceum. And then so all in their climate controlled areas these days. And the firstness, this is something that really this is level 2 of the Mercantile, and it spans various cases of the many firsts. Americana is replete with this. The idea of the first view, the first name on a map, the first narrative of a place. Well, that's the web and warp of Americana overall. But it's very special in St. Louis, again, getting back to the national and the local. Well, I remember one person long ago that in another new to the city, but working in another cultural institution, said, "John, everyone around here talks about the first west of the Mississippi. What's that all about?" And I said, "Well, you'll learn. You know, it's very important here to think of that." But the more I've thought about it, it's so deep in the idea that here, St. Louis, the French founded a city in the middle of the continent in the really the earliest colonial days of New France. And then it became a jumping off point for the entire continent. And so anytime you have a first city directory of a city like this, or the first map of it, the first cultural pieces, the first book indeed printed, you know, in 2/3 of the continent, you really have something, you know, and many things that are here always as a first, sort of Hosmer's Beatrice in the back. You know, that was one of the great firsts of a woman sculptor in America that came here as a present to a board member, and in acknowledgement of how the city allowed her to study here when she wasn't allowed to study in other parts of the country. It's a wonderful story, how this masterpiece of 19th century American art came here, but it had almost anyway, not just the new cases that were put up where we brought all of these many first editions together, but also the permanent collections have the same story and the same drive about them. And then another first, the very first work of art, you know, that came to the library was Charles Days's a painting he called The Prairie. It was just put on loan here, and when he resettled to New York, where he was born, it went with him, and it's been lost in the mists of time. But these portraits of Native American leaders, these 4 large pieces here, were all painted a block away from the Mercantile based on sketches that he made. and the portraits which he became so noted for for all people, many of the greatest ones were done in St. Louis. We can't quite see, you know, but right in the very foreground is one of his landscapes that he made of the West. It's a small jewel-like painting that even though these native portraits have been in the collection for generations, we're still collecting. So it's like through at least for 175 years, we've collected this great artist the way that we had presented Bingham to Missouri and supported Weimar and many other artists. This is one that we felt really needed his first St. Louis debut exhibition. Well, come and look at this gallery. This is the Meyer Gallery. Sooner than later, the farthest portrait, Wakancha Hiraga, is being loaned out to another institution in the middle of our exhibition for a few months, and then it'll come back again by the time that we hopefully will be reopened for together for a gala. And this, on the opposite side, this is the Shopmaker Political Gallery, and these are manuscripts of various presidents. And the Mercantile has always collected those. They've come to us in many different directions. The one to point out here is the second one in the view is Washington's first
Unmute. Okay.
Patent letter.
Wait a minute.
So that's also a really wonderful piece, as well as Jefferson and Madison co-signing an embargo letter, you know, at the close about the time that the War of 1812 was getting, you know, pretty dicey era at that period of time. But you know, but presidential manuscripts have come in various ways and at various times, and have built sizable research collections. We'll talk about another one in a few moments. This is the lower level, the state by state. We wanted to show exhibition, and this is also reflected in these 175 pieces. There are, I wanted to pick one book for every state. The library is a national library, and it has, I could have done this entire gallery in any state I wanted to. And so it's such a fabulous circumstance that it has these items. But what I did, I tried, you can see in the foreground, you can see books that at a slant. And what those are WPA guides that I used as labels rather than just a simple label, to look at 3 books per state, at least 3 books for each state. And that was a consolation. I had to, I think afterwards, I think we put about 500 books away back in the stacks that I just couldn't use here. But again, this was where the local, the place, the idea of first on the landscape really came in to the gallery. And this is the main gallery. The Pratt Gallery is peopled with people and pairings really of different people in the national and local that are national, local, and directly related to the library. So and this inset is a reproduction of the old library. It's sort of a fantastic reproduction of the old library that we wanted to show everyone. So let's look at those pairings for a moment. So on display right at the moment is Thomas Hart Benton's speech on the progress of the age. That's the speech where he pointed out one of our windows and said, "Westward, the star of empire leads this way, and he pointed to the west, and the east is to the west, and through St. Louis. And he was really talking about railroads coming through here and pushing that as strongly as he could at the time. So this actual speech that he gave at the Mercantile, in a very early luncheon lecture, if you will, we have it as a page turner there electronically as well as on display. But he's Senator Benton, this national figure, is paired really in the gallery with another national figure, Lieutenant Silas Bent. There he is in that boat. He's holding this sword, which is in the collection, pointing. He's in Edo Harbor, and you can see the Mississippi Perry's flagship in the far background. While this delegation is coming into Tokyo to discuss trade for the first time in the 1850s. Silas Bent was the second in command of the ship, along with the artist Hine, who did this particular print. They were both the lieutenants under Perry, and the print is incredibly rare, but the sword has been in the collection as well. And Bent came back to a dignified retired soldier's life in the Mercantile, canonized by everyone, and was a board member of the library. I can remember when his grandson died, and I was asked to come out if I was interested in having these pieces for the Mercantile. And it was an icy day in St. Louis with about an inch of ice on the road, but it didn't stop me. You know, I certainly wanted to get those to compare and to have them in just such a setting as we have in the gallery right now. Catlin, note the inset here, St. Louis in 1832. This is a print that the Mercantile made of a painting that was in the collection, which is the first view of the city of St. Louis. So it's a fabulously rare print. The painting long ago, when a fledgling institution, Missouri Historical Society, started to get started to become collecting, our institution seeded them along with other institutions in town. We were the grandparent. We got them started with other pieces. So this Catlin painting was put on display at the Historical Society, but the print commemorates the fact that it was commissioned here for us by Catlin. And Catlin himself is such an interesting story, you know, with our collections, with the Mercantile, this view, the city itself, and as well as a great national figure. But the plot thickens. This is Okipa, one of his rarest books, and it's the rarest of all the copies of this Mandan Indian ceremony, because it has Catlin's own handwritten notes about what he intended to say and to write and to draw about these wonderful pieces that are in this particular book. And again, his work, his great Indian portfolio was one of the best examples. If one thinks of the old Indian galleries, as they were called, the Indian portfolios, the Catlin North American Indian portfolio is probably the one that first comes to mind. General Sherman was a board member here, and his copy came to the Mercantile of that book, and it started to make the library collect other Indian galleries, other Indian portfolios. On the left, these are examples from the McKinney Hall Gallery, and on the right is the St. Louis painters' work, the Aboriginal portfolio, James Otto Lewis's work. The left, the work done by McKinney and Hall, they commissioned various painters in Philadelphia to many times to repaint some of the views that Lewis took on site in at Indian gatherings for allotments, for food allotments. And they've always, and poor Lewis kind of got the short shrift. He wasn't ever considered a very great artist, and the other book was considered far superior and outsold him. So he pretty much died penniless. But his pieces are really pretty wonderful. They're, one time I asked a scholar of Indian galleries, is it possible that Lewis's portraits of these Native Americans were sort of cruder or more angular or are not really well executed? Maybe it's hiding the fact that the Indians that he was painting portraits of were starving. And and so essentially that kind of put a different cast on the fact of one was being very naturalistic, and the other was being very romantic about some of the very same portraits. So these are what I would like, rare book people like to talk about, ghost books. And the Zenas Leonard is a great travel account to Oregon. The Zara McClung is known in only one copy. It's a Gold Rush diary that was printed into a pamphlet and print in St. Louis. This is the only known copy of one of, so it's the rarest of all Gold Rush printed narratives. And James Patty's book, again, is an overland, a private trip, not a government exploration to California. So all of these were collected when they were new at the Mercantile, and as the merchants here were were on the one hand excited about the trade to the West, and by the time of McClung's book, they were dismayed that a lot of the workforce of St. Louis was leaving, and going out West. But McClung was a very commonsensical, reasonable book. It said, well, I went out there, it's as hard as to pass through the eye of a needle to become rich. So I'm coming back to the good agricultural farms of the region. So interesting narratives about what the city witnessed and what the library collected. Felix Darley, some of you've read some of my other works, know that he's a real hero of mine. That's an inset of a buffalo hunt that he did on a map of Kansas and Nebraska in that circular piece. He probably never went west. His imagination about the West was those seminal and great artists. Like, this is a buffalo hunt scene by Carl Weimar in the Mercantile's collection. It's very hard to decide who influenced whom. And here this Weimar, I suppose, you would want to consider him maybe the most painterly of all the St. Louis painters, the Bingham, and very studied and Days. We've seen his work, but everything flows in Weimar, and he seemed, this isn't the first time that he was influenced by Darley, or Darley influenced by him, in the way that their work interchanged. And so I put as many books by Felix Darley as I could in the collection to show just how he illustrated the American story in the middle of the 19th century. But I wanted to juxtapose him. We have Weimar's scrapbooks on display, his scrapbooks, his drawing books, as well as this fabulous hunt scene. Two of my very favorite books in the collection. This is the upper left is one of the street scenes in a book called Pencil Sketches of Colorado by Alfred Matthews, who was a topographer during the Civil War. He did several of these books, one for Montana, one for the Rocky Mountains overall, but the Colorado one is probably the best and maybe the rarest. This was Alfred Matthews' inscribed copy to General Sherman. Sherman again gave this book to the Mercantile Library. It's a tremendous rarity, and I used it in the state gallery as what I like to think of Colorado at the time of the Mercantiles really getting off the ground. But a great Western urban scene. He did about 6 of these street scenes in this sketchbook. He was not only an artist, but a land developer and a promoter of the West. I put that next to, so it's one of the great urban Western books showing how the towns were being developed. And this is Denver. But I put this next to Ware's, Captain Ware's copy of his sketches of the Oregon Territory. This book comes in color versions as well as monochrome versions. We have an early monochrome version of Ware's sketches of Oregon. And so you have the rural West and the urban West at the same time in these 2 great books that were preserved here from the time of our founding. And the Mercantile itself, this is one story that, you know, I think we can all be very proud of as board members and members, but the Emancipation Proclamation was ratified at the Mercantile. Essentially, we were the ex post facto capital of Missouri for a period of time. It was a drill ground and a great center for Union thinking and a bulwark of democracy and of the Union. Not only did we ratify this, but the state government was completely anti-nullification, and in another great vote to keep the state in, as a union state was essentially some work that was done at the Mercantile. A few years later, Mr. Yateman, the founder of the library, was a friend of Lincoln's. As a matter of fact, on that Good Friday, he had visited the White House and met Lincoln, that day, and said, "Oh, James, it's great to see you, Jim. It's great to see you, but could you come back tomorrow?" And he started to tell him about the play he was going to that night. And so the Mercantile Board, when Lincoln was assassinated, was distraught and collected everything they could get on Lincoln. One thing was this is a medallion from the Lincoln hearse in Springfield. And there are only 2 of these. One's in Texas, one's here. And this was used in scale with a photograph to reconstruct a few years ago the Lincoln hearse at the Lincoln Museum. The center gallery is given over to. We try to show as many diverse stories as we could in the Pratt Gallery. This is one of the earliest versions of the "I Have a Dream" speech for the March on Washington for Jobs that the NAACP had put out. And so this was a recent discovery in our stacks. This is pamphlet length. And it's a fabulous piece, but we tried to dance between tragedies and triumphs and tragedies and triumphs again. And so this is, in one case, next to this scrapbook that you see here. In this case, this is Chuck Berry's one of 6 scrapbooks that we have here of his entire career that he put together himself. So each page he turned and put pieces of his important musical life together, in this particular scrapbook. We're probably the family. This particular work is on loan here from the Berry estate, and what they were so thrilled to see the way that we were turning pages in computer monitors for some of the pieces that are on display, that they asked if we could do that for these scrapbooks. So we'll be doing that because they're all digitized online. And when I first came to the Mercantile, I went into the old vault, and the director then, Mrs. Kirshner, showed me everything seemed to be in pairs or pairings even then. And so there were two copies of Henry Lewis's Valley of the Mississippi Illustrated, two copies of Thomas and Wild's Valley of the Mississippi Illustrated, these great books, two copies of Collot's narrative, this great spy account that the French put together. And those were in the Napoleonic era. So I thought, my gosh, what kind of a place is this? Is so fabulous. I was told by the man that trained me I'd probably never handle any of those books because they were so rare. And so I was so happy to be able to be in a place that had them. But this one took the cake because I'm an Illinois kid, and we were always taught about this great frontiersman, John Mason Peck, who created his Gazetteer of Illinois would turn up at farm auctions occasionally, and it was a great treasured piece. He was sort of called a guiding light of the frontier, and when he was a member of the Mercantile, he assiduously fought against slavery in Illinois. He supported Black churches here in the city in a very dangerous time. He was just a magnificent thinker and mover and shaker for this region, and a great Illinoisan himself. But the library he joined was this one because it was the library of the frontier, and so I wanted to show him. We have his library, we have his papers, we have his ledgers for the first school that was founded in Illinois, Shirtlift College. But one of his books was the first gazetteer of all of Illinois and of Missouri, which was Lewis Beck's, who was another shadowy man that lived on the frontier and then did a couple of these books in other parts of the country. But this is one of the very earliest street grid maps of St. Louis that's in the Beck Gazetteer, and this is Beck's copy of Peck's in Peck's library. So I think what a great juxtaposition, and the fact that the library itself was entrusted to preserve Peck's legacy is just a great pairing to me. Another pairing, the Little Shield autobiography, are a collection of 23 of these pictographic plates that were done on ledger paper. It's one of the great treasures of the Mercantile, and we had all of these plates restored. The National Endowment for the Arts helped us with that 30 years ago, and it's traveled the country since that. Actually, it's traveled to Paris, but we have it all out for the first time, and I think we've duplicated most of the plates in our catalog, and I wanted you to see some of them. So it's a great Americana narrative, and in itself in pictographic form, and that's juxtapositioned with the next plate. With the Nash collection, I've called this really the greatest Americana narrative several times, Frederick Douglass's. And so the first edition of that narrative is on display, along with about 20 other of the rarest of the slave narratives. So these two pieces, one high English prose, the other high pictographic prose, are paired together in my mind, and as well as in the book.